The scent of lemon and ammonia was a thin, sharp shield against the tension coiling in the air. Jasmine ran her cloth over the black marble of the foyer table, her movements methodical, practiced. She focused on the circular patterns she left behind, the way they evaporated into a flawless, dark mirror. It was better to focus on the marble than on the sound bleeding from the master suite down the hall. Shouting. Not the low, controlled thunder of her employer, Min-jun, but the high, shattering soprano of his wife, Yuna. Jasmine had been working in the penthouse for 6 months, hired 2 weeks after the accident that had confined the most feared man in Los Angeles' Koreatown to a wheelchair. In that time, she had learned the architecture of silence. She knew the specific weight of the quiet that followed a business meeting, the hollow echo after his lieutenants had filed out, leaving him alone with the sprawling city lights. But this quiet, the one that would follow this fight, felt different. It felt final. The bedroom door flew open, slamming against the wall with a crack that made Jasmine flinch. Yuna stormed out, her face a mask of furious beauty. She was a porcelain doll dipped in venom, dressed in a cream-colored Chanel suit that was worth more than Jasmine's car. 2 of Min-jun's men followed, their faces impassive as they carried her crocodile skin luggage. They did not look at Jasmine. No one ever looked at Jasmine. It was the first rule of survival in this house: become part of the furniture. Yuna stopped in the center of the foyer, her stilettos clicking sharply on the floor Jasmine had just polished. She surveyed the opulent space, the floor-to-ceiling windows, the curated art that was cold and remote. Her gaze was a torch, burning it all down. Then, her eyes landed on the open doorway to the master suite, where Min-jun was a silhouette in his chair, watching her. "I married a king," Yuna's voice was clear, ringing with theatrical cruelty. "Not half a man in a metal throne. This empire needs a leader, not a monument to what used to be." She didn't wait for a reply. She turned, her silk scarf trailing behind her like a surrender flag, and walked out of the penthouse. The heavy door clicked shut, a sound as definitive as a gavel. The 2 men who had carried her bags re-entered, bowed once toward the master suite, and melted back into the shadows of the apartment. The silence that descended was heavier than anything Jasmine had ever felt. It was a physical weight pressing down on her, making it hard to breathe. From the hall, she could see a sliver of him. Min-jun had not moved. His head was bowed, his powerful shoulders slumped in a way she had never seen. He was a man carved from granite, but in that moment, he looked like he might crumble. A sound from inside the room drew her attention, the tinkle of shattering glass. He had swept a crystal vase from a bedside table. Water and white orchids bled across the dark wood floor. For a long minute, he just stared at the mess. Jasmine's heart hammered against her ribs. She was supposed to be invisible, to retreat to the staff kitchen and wait for a summons that might never come. But her feet stayed planted. His voice, when it came, was a low rasp, stripped of its usual authority. "Everyone out." She heard the quiet shuffle of his other household staff, the cook, the junior maids, obeying the command. Doors opened and closed softly. Soon, it was just her in the foyer and him in the ruin of his bedroom. She held her breath, waiting for him to dismiss her, too. He finally lifted his head, his dark eyes finding her reflection in the polished marble of the table. He didn't look at her directly. He looked at the ghost of her standing there, a woman in a simple, dark blue dress, holding a dust cloth. "You," he said. The word was not a question. It was a command. "Clean this up." He wheeled his chair back slightly, giving her space to enter the room that had, until a moment ago, belonged to him and his wife. As she passed him, she caught the scent of his cologne, a subtle, expensive mix of cedar and something like cold smoke. She knelt carefully, her full hips and thighs straining against the fabric of her uniform, and began to pick up the larger shards of crystal. Her hands were steady. She did not look at him, but she could feel his gaze on her, a palpable heat on the back of her neck. That was the moment everything changed. The queen was gone. The staff had been dismissed. And Jasmine, the maid who had mastered the art of being invisible, was the only one left in the room with the broken king. The days that followed fell into a new, stark rhythm. Min Jun's world had shrunk to the penthouse, and Jasmine's had shrunk to him. He had dismissed the rest of the household staff, keeping only his security detail and her. She cooked his meals, simple things he rarely finished. She managed the household accounts. And she was there for the physical therapy sessions. The therapist, Mr. Choi, was a stern, wiry man who spoke only when necessary. He would arrive every afternoon at 2, and for 2 hours, the penthouse would fill with the sounds of Min Jun's struggle. The grunts of exertion, the sharp hiss of his breath, the metallic clang of weights. Jasmine's job was to be present, to hand Mr. Choi equipment, to provide water, and to witness the agonizing process of a man trying to command a body that no longer obeyed. Today was a bad day. The air was heavy with humidity and unspoken frustration. Min Jun was on a mat, his task to push himself up from his stomach, using only his arms. His back was a roadmap of taut muscle, his expensive silk shirt soaked with sweat. He pushed, his arms trembling violently, his jaw clenched so tight a muscle jumped near his temple. He got halfway up before his left arm gave out, and he collapsed back onto the mat with a guttural roar of fury. "Again," Mr. Choi said, his voice flat. Min Jun slammed his fist into the mat. The sound was a dull, defeated thud. "Get out." Mr. Choi didn't flinch. He simply began packing his equipment. "I will see you tomorrow, sir." Jasmine moved to help the therapist, gathering the resistance bands. She avoided looking at Min Jun, knowing his pride was a raw, open wound. As she stood to leave, his voice stopped her. "Stay." She froze, her back to him. Mr. Choi left, the door closing with a soft click behind him. Now it was just them again, surrounded by the instruments of his torture. She could hear his ragged breathing. "Do you think I am weak?" he asked. The question was quiet, but it landed in the center of the room like a grenade. Jasmine turned slowly. He was still on the floor, propped up on his right elbow, his legs inert behind him. The powerful man who controlled a criminal empire was trapped on a yoga mat, his eyes burning with a shame so profound it made her ache. "No," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I think you're angry." A flicker of something, surprise, perhaps, crossed his face. He had expected pity or fear, the two emotions everyone else showed him now. He had not expected a simple, unvarnished truth. He pushed himself back, dragging his body until his back was against the base of a sofa. It was a clumsy, laborious movement, and she had to clench her fists to keep from rushing to help him.
He would not tolerate that.
"Anger is a weakness," he said, more to himself than to her. "It clouds judgment." "Maybe," she offered, taking a small step closer. "Or maybe it's just fuel." He finally looked at her, really looked at her. His gaze traveled over her, not in a leering way, but with a new, assessing curiosity. He took in her generous curves, the simple, functional dress, the way she stood with a quiet dignity that seemed unshakable. She wasn't like Yuna, who was all sharp angles and brittle elegance. Jasmine was soft and strong, like the earth. "My wife," he began, his voice dropping low, "believed love was a transaction. She gave her beauty and her family name. I gave her power and wealth. When my legs stopped working, the terms of the deal were broken." He looked away, toward the window where the city sprawled beneath them. "She confirmed my oldest suspicion. Loyalty is only ever given to the man who can stand on his own 2 feet. It was the most he had ever said to her. A piece of his story, of his pain, offered up in the quiet aftermath of his failure. It was a wound, she realized, far deeper than the one in his spine. It was a wound in his soul. She walked to the small kitchenette in the gym area and poured a glass of water. She brought it to him, setting it down on the floor beside him. Her fingers brushed his as she pulled her hand away. The contact was brief, accidental, but a current passed between them. His skin was hot. He didn't drink the water. He just stared at her hand, then back at her face. "The security protocols for the West Wing are changing tonight," he said, his voice back to its usual clipped, business-like tone. My head of security will give you the new codes. You are to be the only other person who has them. It wasn't an apology for his outburst. It was something more. It was trust. A small, fragile seed planted in the barren ground of his isolation. She was no longer just the maid. She was becoming the keeper of his secrets, the sole witness to his weakness and his strength. And that, she knew, was a far more dangerous position to be in. The penthouse became her entire world. Jasmine learned the subtle language of Min Jun's moods, the tight set of his jaw that meant a deal had gone sour, the rare, almost imperceptible relaxing of his shoulders when a physical therapy session went well. She learned he liked his coffee black and his study silent. She learned the faint scar above his left eyebrow was from a knife fight in his youth, a story she pieced together from a hushed conversation she overheard between two of his guards. He, in turn, began to see her. He noticed the way she hummed softly to herself when she arranged flowers, a low, melodic sound that soothed the sharp edges of the apartment. He noticed she always saved the corner piece of the brownie for herself, and that she read classic literature on her breaks, her brow furrowed in concentration. He started leaving books on the kitchen counter for her, Tolstoy, Dumas, without comment. One rainy Tuesday, the tension that always simmered beneath the surface of their lives boiled over. A rival faction, led by a ruthless man named Seng-hoon, had been testing the borders of Min Jun's territory, seeing his paralysis as an open invitation. The day had been filled with hushed, urgent phone calls. Min Jun's face had been a mask of cold fury. That evening, as Jasmine was serving his dinner in the library, the world went sideways. The first sign was a soft thud from the foyer, a sound that didn't belong. Min Jun's head snapped up, his eyes instantly alert. He was a predator, even in his chair. "Get behind me," he ordered, his voice a low, lethal command. He spun his wheelchair around, facing the library doors, and pressed a hidden button on the armrest. A quiet click, and Jasmine knew he had released the safety on the custom-fitted handgun concealed within the chair's frame. Before she could even process the command, the library doors burst open. Two men, dressed in black and armed with silenced pistols, filled the doorway. They were not Min Jun's men. Their movements were swift, professional, assassins. Time seemed to warp, stretching and slowing. One man raised his weapon. Jasmine saw the small, dark hole of the muzzle, and her body reacted before her mind could. She didn't scream. She didn't run. She grabbed the heavy, silver tray holding Min Jun's dinner and flung it with all her strength. The platter of steak, vegetables, and hot gravy flew through the air, a chaotic, messy projectile. It struck the first gunman in the face. He staggered back with a cry of pain and surprise, hot food scalding his skin. That was the opening Min Jun needed. His own gun appeared in his hand, as if by magic. Two precise shots, so close together they sounded like one. The sounds were soft pops, not the loud bangs she expected for movies. Both men crumpled to the floor, red blossoms staining their black shirts. Silence descended, thick and ringing. The only sounds were Jasmine's own ragged breaths and the smell of gunpowder, blood, and ruined steak. She stared at the two bodies on the expensive Persian rug, her heart trying to beat its way out of her chest. Min Jun slowly lowered his gun. He looked from the dead men to her. She was standing frozen, her hands still outstretched from her throw, her blue uniform splattered with gravy. There was no fear in his eyes, only a new, intense focus as he looked at her. He saw not a maid, but a fighter, a survivor. "Come here," he said. She moved on numb legs, stepping carefully around the bodies until she stood beside his chair. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "You have good instincts," he said, his thumb tracing a slow circle on the back of her hand. It was a touch that was both a comfort and a claim. I didn't think," she stammered. "You acted," he corrected her. "You saw a threat and you eliminated it. Most people freeze. You fought." She looked down at their joined hands. His was large, calloused, the hand of a man who had built an empire through will and violence. Hers was soft, capable, the hand of a woman who had cleaned and cared for that empire's king. They did not belong together, and yet, in that moment, nothing had ever felt more right. She had crossed a line. She had participated in the violence, not just witnessed it. She had saved his life, and in doing so, had tied her own fate to his in a way that could never be undone. She was no longer just an employee. She was an accomplice, part of his world. He didn't let go of her hand. He kept his eyes on her face, his gaze searching, intense. For months, I have told myself that keeping you here was a matter of convenience, he said, his voice a low, rough murmur. That you were simply efficient, he paused, the silence stretching between them, filled with the weight of everything unsaid. I was lying to myself. It was not a declaration of love. It was something far more dangerous. It was an admission of need, a confession, stripped bare of romance, raw and honest and terrifying. He needed her. And looking into the depths of his dark, unreadable eyes, Jasmine realized the most terrifying thing of all. She needed him, too. The quiet life she had once known was gone forever, replaced by this perilous, charged existence. And she would not have gone back, even if she could. The failed assassination attempt changed the atmosphere in the penthouse from a quiet prison to a fortified bunker. Min Jun's security detail tripled. Men with hard eyes and subtle bulges under their tailored suits now stood sentinel in the halls. Jasmine learned to navigate around them, her presence a soft, familiar counterpoint to their sharp-edged vigilance. Sang-hoon, the rival who had sent the assassins, was not a man to accept failure. He knew a direct assault had failed, so he changed tactics. He began to dig into Min Jun's life, searching for a vulnerability. He found Jasmine. It started subtly. A car that seemed to be parked outside her apartment building a little too often. A man at the grocery store who asked her a few too many questions. Jasmine, now attuned to the undercurrents of danger, noticed. She reported it to Min Jun, her voice calm and steady as she relayed the license plate number she had memorized. He listened, his expression unreadable, but a muscle in his jaw tightened. The thought of them watching her, targeting her, lit a cold fire in his gut. She had become the one piece of his life that was not about power or territory. She was his sanctuary, and Sang-hoon was threatening to burn it down. The final move came a week later. Jasmine received a call. The number was blocked, but the voice was panicked, claiming to be a nurse from a hospital near her sister's home. There had been an accident. Her sister, Keisha, was in critical condition. Jasmine's blood ran cold. She told the nurse she was on her way and hung up, her hands shaking. Her first instinct was to run, to get to her sister. But the last few months had taught her to think differently, to see the move behind the move. She took a deep breath, walked into Min Jun's study, and told him everything. He listened without interruption. When she was finished, he made a single call. He spoke in low, rapid Korean, his voice like ice. After he hung up, he looked at her. "Your sister is fine," he said, his voice gentle but absolute. "She is at her office, annoyed because I had my men interrupt her meeting to confirm it. It was a lie, Jasmine. A trap to get you out of this building and into their hands." The relief that washed over her was so immense it made her knees weak. She sank into the chair opposite his desk. Keisha was safe. But the second wave of emotion was cold, terrifying dread. They had used her family. They had found her weakest point and tried to break her with it. Min Jun watched the play of emotions on her face. He saw the fear, but he also saw the anger that followed it. "He will not stop," Min Jun stated a simple fact. "As long as you are here, you are a target. A way to get to me," he paused, the weight of his next words filling the room. "I can make you disappear. A new name, a new life. Enough money to go anywhere you want, to be safe. You would be free of this. Of me." He was offering her an escape. A clean break. It was the most honorable thing he could do, the only way he knew how to protect her. By sending her away. The silence stretched. Outside, the city hummed with life, a world she could return to. A normal world, free of assassins and power plays. A safe world. An empty one. Jasmine lifted her head, her gaze meeting his. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the war between his duty to protect her and the selfish, desperate desire to keep her. She had come to know this man, not the Mafia boss, but the man himself. The man who struggled against his own body, who hid a deep well of loneliness behind a wall of power, who left classic novels on the counter for his maid. She stood up, her movements deliberate, certain. She walked not to the door, but to the integrated security panel on the wall beside his desk. Her fingers moved surely over the screen, inputting the codes he had entrusted to her. With a series of soft, heavy clicks, the penthouse went into full lockdown. Steel shutters descended over the bulletproof windows, plunging the room into an intimate, artificial twilight. The world was shut out. She turned back to him. "Looks like I'm staying in," she said, her voice even, without a tremor of doubt. It was her choice. Not a decision made from fear or necessity, but a conscious, deliberate choice to stay in the danger, to stay with him. She was choosing his world. She was choosing him. For the first time since she had known him, Min-jun looked completely unguarded. The cold mask of the boss fell away, revealing the man beneath, stunned and humbled. 1,000 emotions crossed his face, but the one that settled in his eyes was a raw, profound gratitude. He wheeled his chair closer, stopping just before her. Slowly, with an effort that was visible in the taut chords of his neck, he reached out his hand. It trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the sheer force of his emotion. He did not ask. He did not command. He simply offered. Jasmine placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, a warm, solid weight. It was not the grip of a boss on an underling. It was the touch of a man holding onto his anchor in a storm. "Jasmine," he said, and the way he spoke her name was different. It was not an order or a statement. It was a prayer. A cost had been paid. She had sacrificed her old life, her peace of mind, her claim to the ordinary world. He, in turn, had sacrificed his most fundamental rule: never let anyone get close enough to become a weakness. He had let her in, and in doing so, had become more vulnerable and more powerful than he had ever been before. In the silent, sealed penthouse, high above the sprawling, indifferent city, they stood together. Her hand in his, a quiet alliance forged in violence and sealed by choice. It was not a fairy tale ending. It was something realer, harder, and infinitely more precious. It was a beginning, a kingdom of two, locked away from the world, ready to face whatever came next, together.